Hey babies.
I'm back. For now.
You know what? I'm a champ, and I'm back.
I don't know what to say. This is the fourth time. I will not be letting this happen again.
And now you're complaining because I'm coming back in town?
You don't deserve it.
I don't have anybody to answer to.
I don't get a hug?
Not really.
It has been a while.
I've had some time off, been away for too long.
Yes, it is me, the one we've all been waiting for. Hi, people.
I haven't uploaded a video in like 8 months. And that's because since then I've got a new job that is full-time and it's left me tired and needing my rest. So when I haven't been working, I've been reading, writing, playing Alien Isolation on the PlayStation, which I've been absolutely loving. And I have tried filming videos.
We are here because we're trying.
I've tried filming videos on Sylvia Plath, and I would just sit down and absolutely ramble. And when I edit it back, I'm like, this is so boring. So I delete it. So I thought I'll try something different. Otherwise, it will probably be like another 8 months until I do this video.
Look, I'm sorry.
So I'm coming in like 3 months late to do my best and worst books of last year, 2022. I've got some novels, some poetry, yeah, and that's it. I have my tea in my Cheshire Cat mug.
So, without further ado, let's talk.
I didn't even read that many books that were published last year because I've got a big TBR shelf behind me. And this year will probably be the same, to be honest. I'll probably only read a few new releases that I've had my eye on for a while. So I'll probably do this the same way that I've done it before, where I talk about the best books that I read in 2022, that were published in 2022, and the best books I read in 2022 that weren't published that year. And then I'll do the same for the worst books. So what should I start off with? One that I have already talked about. The Weight of Loss by Sally Oliver. They just came out with the paperback for this book. Now, I don't think The Weight of Loss is the kind of book that blows you away, but I did really like the unsettling parts of it, and I thought the writing was stellar, especially for a debut. Yeah, it's a book I'd happily reread, so I think out of the debut books I read last year, that was probably the best. Oh, I also really liked Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I got that one from the library. It only took me like a day to read that one because it's so short, but I love the writing in that one. Even the opening of it, where the housewives in this like little Irish town and the wind's like whipping them up, and it was just so beautiful. I think if you like Pat Barker's early stuff, pre-Regeneration, you would love Claire Keegan. And now I want to read more Claire Keegan books. I love the main character as well, Furlong I think his name was, and how he was just going through this town delivering coal and seeing all these horrible things happen, and it had a lot to say about morality and society and and religion as well, actually. Yeah, I thought that book was so excellent.
Y'all are gonna gag.
You're gonna gag. Now I know you're absolutely gagging. I've got you gagging.
And then the other books that were my favourite that were published that year were actually poetry collections. Probably the most hyped poetry collection would have been Time Is a Mother by Ocean Vuong, and I did really like this.
Really?
I dream about it. I really do.
And this was quite different than his first book, Night Sky with Exit Wounds, because I think in general this was much friendlier than that book. And that's probably because he's trying to cater just for the new audience he had of, you know, young people who read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous and were like, oh my god, this is amazing. And also trying to please all the poetry critics and people who have just held him up as an absolute messiah in the poetry world. I think it would be difficult for any writer to try and bridge that gap in the audience, and I think for only his second poetry collection he actually did really well in that. It's actually had quite a few mixed reviews, Time Is a Mother, but I actually really liked it. You know, there would be poems where he goes from talking about 9/11 to then talking about an R&B song by Ashanti. So I actually loved that blend of stuff, but I guess other people didn't.
You idiots! You fools!
My favourite poem was probably called Not Even. Yeah, Not Even, and it just starts, hey, I used to be a fag, now I'm a checkbox. The pen tip jabbed in my back. I feel the mark of progress. It's kind of awesome to just start a poem with hey. I thought that was quite fun. And I actually thought there were parts of it that were kind of humorous and ironic as well. And you don't see that in poetry very much. So I actually really, really loved this. Even though I do feel like there were parts where if the mother was meant to be a presiding figure of the collection, he could have done more with that. But I can't wait to see what poetry he writes next. Novel-wise, I'm not sure. I didn't like On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous much. So.
Get out. Trash.
Okay, and what other poetry collections do I have? Ooh, now, in the British poetry world, An Exhausted Time by Emily Berry was another massively hyped poetry collection. Is this my favourite Emily Berry? I don't know. Dear Boy, her first collection is probably my favourite just because I find that one the most comforting. And in this one, a lot of the poems have the same form and structure and like typography. And I guess that was meant to represent the boxy banality of the pandemic, but that was just my reading of that. There's a lot in here actually about Englishness, and like one of the poems was called The Remains of the Day. I was like, oh my god, Ishiguro reference. And a lot of it also dealt with similar themes to her second collection, Stranger Baby. A lot of, you know, therapy, exploration stuff, the mother she had that died. But I felt like this was a lot more accessible than Stranger Baby overall. I thought some of the writing here was just so lush. I'll read you a bit of this one. Writing was a mist rising off my life, that's all, dependent on atmospheric conditions for its existence. There was a time when I sensed this chance mist all around me, and I felt myself beatified. I called myself Angel of the Mist.
Isn't it just beautiful?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was so lush. That one would definitely have to be a favourite. What else? I also read this one that was published in 2022. But I wouldn't say the collection as a whole has stayed with me that much, but there was one poem about a red squirrel that I loved. So I wanted to read you a bit of that one. Oh, where is it? It was called Red Squirrels in Coed Cydnal. And Coed Cydnal is a forest on the island of Anglesey. I've never been to Anglesey in Wales, but I do really want to go because I've still not seen a red squirrel. Let's say the sky's all yours in a jump for thin branches, shy crowns giving flight to impossible belief. When you're all claws, whose spiral and spring comes on the hour, on time we say, but whose? I thought that was really fun and gave me Emily Dickinson vibes. So I really liked that one. So yeah, those are the books that were published in 2022 that I liked. But out of the ones that weren't published that year, I'd say the highlight would be the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante. I absolutely loved these books. It's also called like the My Brilliant Friend set of books or whatever. But the first one's My Brilliant Friend. Out of all of them, I'd probably say the second one is my favourite. The Story of the New Name. It follows Lenu and Leela, they're the girls, and the whole quartet follows them as they grow up, and I just love this series of books so much. I loved the setting of Naples, I loved all of it. I loved the writing, even though the books are modern in terms of the way they treat things like sex and morality. I thought that the actual style had a kind of classical novel feel to it, so I absolutely loved that about the book. I love the competitive nature of them as they grow up. There'll be parts where Leela will just be nasty to people, and the narrator, Lenu, won't even tell you what she says. She'll just say Leela was just being so sarcastic, but she won't tell you what it is. So sometimes I really wanted to know what things she would say, but I think over the course of the novels you get to know the characters so well that you can gauge the kind of things they say. And I think the novels being told that way, it gives a momentum to them, so I kind of just kept wanting to read on and on and on, and I was so sad when they ended. And I just loved how nasty they were to each other, and I loved the character of Nino. Oh my god, I fancied him so much.
Oh, he's so handsome.
His soul is dead and his heart is black. And I wouldn't exactly say no. I would drive off a cliff with this man.
So you're ride or die?
Ride or die.
I want to gag. I want to choke. I want you to touch that little dangly thing that's swinging in the back of my throat.
The movement in my stomach is what I'm saying is real. I know 1,000% I am giving birth to multiples. I think I'm carrying 6 babies.
Yeah, that was definitely a highlight, and just in general, reading Elena Ferrante was a highlight last year. Like, I absolutely adored The Lost Daughter, and I loved Troubling Love. Days of Abandonment, I didn't like that much, but I think I might talk about Elena Ferrante more in another video, because I could talk about her all day.
Just gorgeous.
And I think the only book I have left to read now by Ferrante is Frantomeglia, which is about the book she came out with at the start of her career, and talking about how she's tried to remain aloof as an author, so I'm really excited for that. Now, some other books that I read would be A Patchwork Planet by Anne Tyler. I loved Breathing Lessons last year in 2021 when I read that, but A Patchwork Planet was really good. I loved the main character Barnaby so much. It's kind of like Catcher in the Rye-ish, but he's in his like 30s, and his whole family are like, what are you doing with your life? You should be doing more with your life. I really loved those feels. I was surprised at how much I loved this book, and that would be The Dead Avocado by Elaine Dundee. Now, this book came out in the late 50s. I absolutely lapped this novel up. It's about this young American woman. How old is she? 20, I think? And then her rich uncle tells her, for 2 years, I'll pay for you to go off to Paris and just live life. So it's just her bumbling around Paris and getting involved with just messy people, and I just absolutely loved it. It was so fun.
I gagged. I truly gagged.
I think when I talked about it on Instagram, I talked about it how it was like Esther Greenwood in The Bell Jar, except if she wasn't depressed. That's what The Dead Avocado would be like. Yeah, if there's a modern classic you should read, it should be The Dead Avocado by Elaine Dundee.
Amazing, spectacular, just lush, lush.
Now, let's see what else. Cover-wise, I would say the best book cover for me would be Lapvona by Ottessa Moshfegh. Yeah, I do love that cover with the black and the blue and the sheep on it. I just think that's such a lush cover. And I love that it's just so simple as well. But I wouldn't say the book itself was a favourite.
I'm not obsessed with this.
I've also read all her books now too, so if you want me to do a video talking about her, I'll do that at some point. Yeah, I have read Lapvona. It didn't particularly impress me. I thought it was okay. There were elements of the book that I liked, but there were other elements of it that were just eye-rolling. Like, oh my god, now this witchy old lady all of a sudden has horse eyes that she can see out of, and everybody's just meant to, you know, take that for what it is.
Bitch, please.
To me, that's ridiculous.
But then nothing else that's like magical realist happens at all, so I was like a bit inconsistent. I don't know, I get that the whole book was kind of meant to be a fable for like contemporary life, but it just wasn't particularly enjoyable or particularly enthralling for me. What else? Ooh, and then last year what was also a highlight was that I read the Hannibal series by Thomas Harris. You know, like Silence of the Lambs, or there was a whole book series, so I read the whole book series. I mean, I did really like the first 3, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs, and Hannibal. And I think out of them, I would say Hannibal was the best. So Hannibal would probably be one of the best books I read last year too. I thought the writing was really good in that. Like, the writing went up a whole notch for me and got out of normal, boring crime novel style writing, and it became, like, really good writing. Yeah, and like those scenes with the pigs eating people, oh my god, it was so good. Except for the end. The end was absolute garbage.
Don't stop me, Dale. I won't put up with it.
Like, Clarice and Hannibal, no. It was just, like, disgusting. And that also leads on to one of the worst books I read, which would be Hannibal Rising, the final book in that series. It did actually have some good moments, but I gave up on it around, what was it, the 200-page mark? And I believe Hannibal Rising, Thomas Harris only wrote that book because he knew, you know, in the world of fan fiction and spin-offs, that other people would come out with Hannibal Lecter's backstory unless he wrote that himself. So that's why he wrote the book. And I did like getting that backstory, but at the same time, the dialogue, I just couldn't get past the dialogue in the book. The dialogue was just garbage. It was just the most like pseudo-literary cringe writing ever. I think at one point Hannibal was in love with his stepmother or something, and they were just talking in this fake like Shakespearean language, like, oh my god, I love you like the stars at night, and just shit like that. And I was like, I'm giving up on this because I cannot read any more of this language.
It makes me gag.
Which was a shame because apparently it has more moments in it that are good. I don't know if I even will try reading it again because I feel like from what happened in it, I got what his childhood was and why he became a serial killer like he was. So I don't feel like I need to read any more of the story. But yeah, I would say that was the worst just for the dialogue alone. Now, another one that would be my least favourite would be... Ooh, let's go back to Natasha Moshfegh. So I also got Death in Her Hands from the library, and I've actually heard loads of people love that book, and I didn't like that book much at all.
I'm sorry, I can't. Don't hate me.
Can't remember the main character's name, but she's just like living in this New England forest area. I don't know, can't remember if it's New England, but some area kind of like that. And what is she doing? She's like walking around the woods, and then she sees this note that says, I killed Magda. And then for the rest of the novel, she is trying to imagine what this Lady Magda would like, and you know how she got into this predicament by being murdered by somebody. Now, I did actually really like that it opened with that note and her finding the note. I thought that had a really lush, thrilling feel to it, and it gave like Muriel Spark vibes of, you know, paranoia and these women stepping out of ordinary lives. And so I loved that aspect of it. But then the whole execution of the novel, I was just like, why should I care? She's meant to be like projecting how bored and isolated she is into this like fictional idea of Magda. But to me, I don't really care that much about that. I want to know more about you and your history. So by page 180, I was like, nothing's happened yet. Nothing has happened at all. The book could have been a really good short story because there was an excellent part of that story where the main woman, she comes across this house where these people are having this party and everybody is dressed like they're from the Victorian era, and I just thought that was such an excellent scene. So I loved that scene, but I'm glad that I didn't, you know, skip over that scene or give up on it before then. But it could have just been a really good short story. I don't feel like the novel form did the story much justice. So that's my opinion on that. I think if you're such a boring person that even your dog runs away from you, is that really somebody worth being the protagonist of a novel? Not for me. And that isn't really spoilers because a little bit more happens than that. But if you're interested in that book, you'll read it. That was my least favourite Moshfegh for me, probably.
I want it. Sorry.
What would I say was the worst cover of 2022? The Promise by Damon Galgut, the South African writer. Now, that book came out in 2021. Somebody lent me it, and then I tried reading it, and I couldn't get past the 20-page mark. There's meant to be 4 funerals in that book, but I gave up on it just because the first funeral, this woman in it just kept crying. By page 10, she'd already burst into tears 4 times, and I was like, get yourself together. I was like, I don't even know who's died yet. I don't even know what the whole predicament is, and you're just crying, and I meant to take it. Like, you can do one.
I'm done. I don't want to say anything else.
So I gave up on the book because I was like, if this is the first funeral and there's 3 more, I don't want to read a book where there's somebody bursting into tears for the rest of it. So I did abort that book. But loads of people say that it's just absolutely amazing. So if The Promise is worth reading, let me know. Is it just an absolute sob story, or does it actually get good? Because it was giving me nothing. Or if there's a book from his backlist that's really good, and that would be the best one to start with, then which one of his would you recommend to me if you've read his stuff? But yeah, just for the cover alone, The Promise deserves to be in the worst books of the year for me. It's got some like miserable child on the front. It looks like an advert for like a child abuse charity. And I don't like that corner thing where the corner's coming apart.
It's not gagging me. It's not giving.
I don't know why publishers do that. It annoys me so much. I think they might have got rid of that on the paperback edition, but the hardback edition I had that somebody lent me, it had that corner page thing there and I hated it. Hated it. I don't think I've even talked about a book that was published in 2022 that I didn't like. It's another cover that I didn't like. Milk Teeth? I do not know what is going on with this cover. What is that, like a nectarine? Pieces of a nectarine? I don't like this cover.
I'm feeling really bitchy today.
Yeah, now this one I was mega excited for this. I pre-ordered this. I was so disappointed because after I read her debut novel Saltwater in 2020, soon after I started this channel actually, I loved that book. And so I was so excited for her second novel. And then when it came, I got 50 pages in and was like, this is so not garbage, but I'm not liking it. It's about this young woman, I think she says she's 28 at one point. It's kind of similar to her first book where it's told in like little vignettes. And in her first novel, I think that style worked really well. But in this one, it just didn't to me. Now, I believe this novel is meant to be dealing with anorexia. And I guess it's like a situationship where the woman has a boyfriend and then he moves to Switzerland for some job or something. But straight away, I didn't really get any characterisation of him other than he was just some like hot hipster guy who's like 28 and he wears Doc Marten boots. And that was like it. Doesn't every other person who's like 60 and under have a pair of Doc Marten boots? Like that doesn't do anything for me. Oh my god, I'm being such a bitch. In her first novel, Saltwater, the writing was lyrical. I think it became like purple prose-ish sometimes. But I remember in Saltwater you got quite a lot about the narrator's family and her mother and her father and her grandparents and her brother who was like deaf in it. Even though because it wasn't linear and it was told in these little vignettes, you got a lot of backstory, so you had quite a lot of context for everything. Whereas in this, I just didn't feel that connection to her at all. Oh, that was really disappointing. Writing-wise, it just felt so weak. Like, look at this from Milk Teeth. Listen to this. I walk back home through the morning rush, my lips chafed and swollen, the smell of your sweat in my hair. The air is sharp on my tingling skin, and I unbutton my coat and let it sting me awake. I carry the thrill of you inside me like something dangerous. A pan of boiling water, threatening to spill. I think of the light splitting your bedroom curtains, your face smudged with sleep on the pillow. In the past, I would never have allowed myself to reach out and take any part of you, but I am trying to live more easily, to become someone softer.
I nearly died of the shame.
Disgusting. So yeah, I found the writing really cringy and didn't like it at all, which is strange because I've heard people rave about the book. Like, let's compare that writing to this writing.
Let's be honest. Let's really analyze that.
There have been times when my skin has been so thin, it is as though the morning light might leak through me, like those IKEA paper lamps that started off cool and ended up crumpled on the floor, red wine-stained and sagging from cheap skeletons in sad student rooms. Yeah, I just thought that writing was much more vivid and beautiful, and it still felt tethered to like real life, whereas that writing just felt so pseudo-liminal and, oh my god, I have skin, I have flesh, and underneath my skin there's blood, and blood comes from my heart, and you are in my heart. Like that, it was given those vibes, and I hated Milk Teeth.
Who wrote that shit? Electric chair.
When I got to the page 50 mark, I was like, would I rather reread Saltwater that I loved, or carry on reading this? And I would rather reread that, so wouldn't recommend this one. And now, for the last worst book of 2022 that I read, it would be 45 by Frida Hughes. Now, Frida Hughes is the daughter of Sylvia Plath and Ted Hughes, and when I realised she was a poet, I was like, ooh, well, let's see what her poetry's like. And I read Waxworks by her, which was very much like The World's Wife by Carol Ann Duffy, readdressing characters from the Bible, mythology, fairy tales. So I like this one. But 45 was meant to be autobiographical, and I remember reading some people online saying it's spilling loads of the tea about how she grew up, how she's been married 3 times, her various illnesses and health conditions and eating disorders and things like that, and how she didn't get on with Ted Hughes' wife very much, Carol, the one he was married to for the longest. Apparently she didn't take very well to being a stepmother.
Is there any more tea? Of course there is.
So I was reading it, like, lapping it up for all those details. I really, like, devoured this for reading it from a trashy perspective, which is my own fault, but I couldn't resist. Like, look at this. Second year, 1961. Third year, 1962. I would say that reading it from like an autobiographical standpoint, I would say, oh my god, it's full of tea. But at the same time, because they're poems, they don't really have the context to them that a memoir would have, so I wish she'd just written a memoir. But she did do this poetry collection alongside a group of paintings, so I think that was the 45 exhibition that she did, and they're all like abstract paintings, and I actually think the paintings are much more beautiful than these poems were, because the actual quality of the poetry was really bland. The poetic language felt very awkward. So I would say, in terms of the reading experience, I devoured this, but in terms of the actual quality of the poetry I read, this would have to count as the worst book of poetry I read, quality-wise, in 2022.
I speak my mind, I say it how it is. It's the truth.
Yeah, like, listen to this one. 30th year, 1989. I was homesick for Australia, while a mile-long meal that had been dismissed by a college tutor's careless hand became a book in America, Australia and England. My terracotta walls were closing in on me, my husband-to-be not understanding how football on TV in the corner of the living room made my work a mockery, and me, responsible for where we lived, the gas and electricity.
It was good, wasn't it? Let's face it.
No.
Next caller.
I'll wait.
Now, I do think that she had an earlier collection called Woolloomooloo, which is set in the place where she lived in Australia. I think that one was a Poetry Book Society recommendation, so I think that one is meant to be good. So I think I'll give that one a go. I do follow her on Instagram, and she has loads of cool stuff going on. Like, she shows you her artwork, her owls, the work she's doing on the house where she lives. So, yeah, that's really cool. But I think the painting was better than the poetry for this.
Run from it, girl.
Yeah, I'd say that's it for this video. Thank you very much for sticking around on my channel.
This was a good nudge to get me on camera. Because every time I come on, then I'm glad I did. And then, time will go by and I'm like, God, I don't want to get ready. Is anybody still going to watch me?
I'm going to try and upload once a week, or at least every fortnight. So I'm going to see how well I do at committing to that.
Let's not kid ourselves, that's going to happen now.
I'm going to keep trying to film Sylvia Plath videos, but if I keep rambling in them, then I don't know. In the meantime, I think I'll just upload videos that I feel like uploading. It's been like nearly a year, so I've read a lot of books since I've last been on here, and I've got lots of books to talk about. What were some of your best and worst reads of last year, or the year 2022? Let me know, and stick around for my next video. Okay, bye.
I can't. Get out.